Week 8 with Walker Buehler, and we've got a new Magic Elixir. Old Forester Statesman we're going with today. Peter screwed up and got the different Old Forester, but I'm aligned with you, Walker.
Where are we? There we are.
There we are. This thing looks awesome. Like, just before the taste, I'm really excited. Why do you like this thing?
Yeah, so to me, this one is just a little bit different. It's pretty smooth, but it's kind of got a bigger flavor without a lot of burn. And I'm typically not a big Old Forester guy, but as you said, it's actually just a pretty cool looking bottle. And I think part of this whole bourbon thing is like buy things that you think are cool, you're gonna like them more kind of deal. So having bourbon bars and stuff like that is obviously become a big deal, and cool bottles are part of that. So I found this one a couple months ago, basically just off looks, and now it's probably one of my favorites.
So I was told that I screwed up. I got the wrong Old Forester, but what I will say is I don't think I screwed up in terms of taste. This shit's
You're
real.
a fan.
It's
yeah.
real.
They have a lot of different varieties. They do some stuff that other companies do. I'm not 100% certain on the Statesman or what that designates, but a lot of the Old Foresters that look more like that bottle that you got, they have a bunch of different varieties. One I know is called Prohibition style, and they kind of leave some different filtering levels and stuff like that. So, definitely a pretty good one. You guys like it?
Basically, I tripped into a winner. That's how I feel.
There we go.
Great.
It passes. Yeah, and it passes the eye test. It passed the taste test as well. So we're living there. Hey, I want to talk.
It's kind of got a little rye to it, is what it is, I think.
A little bit, yeah. I can taste that. It's not as. Would more rye mean less like sweetness?
I'm typically not a big fan of rye, but kind of in the middle of that taste, you can taste like a little higher note, and that's typically the rye.
Okay.
Yes, Walker. I remember last time we were talking about bourbon, and I told you how much I love old fashions now. Like, this feels like a perfect old fashioned kind of bourbon because it even has a little bit of that orange, or at least it tastes like it to me, my uncultured tongue.
Right.
But it tastes
no,
great.
I think initially the old fashioned was made with rye, so that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Hey, we're going to talk Emmet Sheehan with you. We're going to talk Father's Day with you, and just who you loved growing up. And then we've been all in on Omaha through this front weekend. Yeah. So want to get your feel because you were in Omaha twice and you made it to the final game twice. You had to play 3 in the championship series in your sophomore and junior year. But first, how about this rookie right-hander? Made his big league debut on Friday for the Dodgers. Holy shit, dude. Yeah. 6 no-hit innings from Sheehan. What did you take away from that thing?
It's pretty crazy. I was talking to somebody about it the other day. Number one, it's a really wacky throw. Works really good, comes out of his hand really good, but it is a little bit funky, and I think that'll be something interesting to watch going forward. I don't think you don't luck into much into the major leagues, but not having familiarity with a guy and having kind of that funk to it, I think is definitely beneficial and is going to help him for a long time. And kind of give him that leash to figure out the big leagues, which seemingly he did at least for a night, right? So, we'll see how it continues, but obviously as good a start as you could ask for.
Can you talk a little bit about his path up to the bigs? Because I think preseason, a lot of people thought it was Bobby Miller and then it's Gavin Stone. And we knew that the Tulsa Drillers would have this incredible pitching rotation. I don't think anybody thought it would be this good. And Emmet Sheehan was really kind of that top guy. Yeah. Then he gets the call, and he doesn't allow a hit. And it's not just he didn't allow a hit to the Rockies, with all due respect. He didn't allow a hit to the Royals. This was against a Giants team that is rolling, playing some of the best baseball. And he was the guy among all the Dodgers starting pitchers. 6 innings, no hits. He looked incredible. Can you kind of talk about his meteoric rise up to the bigs?
Yeah, I think every year that goes by, I kind of know less and less about, the prospects of the guys coming up. So he's not a guy that I was super familiar with, but obviously saw him in camp this year. And the angle of the throw to the zone is so different. That's probably the first thing I saw in the bullpen from him is just like it's a really interesting look in terms of we talk about launch angle and hitting that kind of approach angle of the fastball is something that's very real. And, you think kind of guys off the top, DeGrom is one of those guys. Scherzer is one of those guys that it's really low, but has plays up, and Hader is certainly one of those guys as well. So it's kind of that look, and he's a big, strong kid. I think he's 6'5" and put together pretty good, and he made some really big pitches. And I guess going back to the Giants part of it, like really a lot of really good left-handed hitters, right? And so to run through a lineup with a lot of lefties, especially, one of their strengths is just the matchup stuff, and players like Jock Peterson that, I think platoon is one of those things that's kind of thrown around a little too much these days, but they have really, really talented platoon hitters and guys that I've had to face that really hit righties, and to navigate through it the way he did was pretty impressive.
Jock is a really interesting one, and I know that you know Jock well, but I just want to stick on him for a moment because this was a guy that so many baseball, I guess, fans and people were saying just give him a shot every day because he wasn't necessarily getting that 162 type shot. And when we see him over 162, he's an all-star. Like, how good is Jock Peterson? What does the public not know about Jock?
Yeah, kind of one of those uber talented guys. I think one of the funniest things that people don't really understand is Jock was a 30-30 guy in AAA. Like, he can run, and every football season you see the highlights of him and Devontae Adams, and they play football together. Jock's just extremely athletic, and I think over the years maybe his body shape has changed a little bit, and people don't really realize how athletic he really is. But being around him a lot, like, it's weird to talk about other grown men's bodies, but he's just dense and strong, and he's got that twitch, and he hits some pitches that other people don't hit. And maybe next week we can show it. He hit a homer off me in LA 2 years ago or last year that was like 4 inches above the zone and 2 inches in off the plate, and he pulled it down the line. It was like I think it was a fastball or a cutter up in there. It was just other people don't really hit that, and fun dude and fun teammate for sure. But I think he's gotten to that point now where it's hard because he's played so many years where he's not getting as many reps against lefties. So even if he was, predominantly way better against righties early in his career, but, in his second year, they let him face lefties, like, you don't have that gap of like, I haven't seen a lefty in 4 years or whatever. So obviously probably one of the best guys against right-handed pitching in baseball, but we'll see if he ever kind of gets that chance to prove it.
I got a fashion follow-up for you real quick, but what do you think of the pearls from him?
I was not a fan, but it worked out for him. They're in the Hall of Fame, so it's hard to really say anything about it.
Yeah. Okay. So now my fashion question. So you've been quote tweeting Bobby Miller's outfits, and we're talking young Dodger right-handers. We're going to get to Omaha in a moment, and Bobby's fit this weekend. You said Curious George-esque. I went a different route. I said this guy from the fish sticks box.
Oh, fair.
You remember him?
You see, I don't eat any seafood, so the fish sticks are a little foreign to me. But
I wouldn't call that seafood, fish sticks. But what have you made of Bobby's fits so far? Did you think that was maybe the bottom dweller, or was that?
They're fantastic, man. I think they're great. Obviously, it takes a special kind of confidence to wear that, I think. I kind of go the opposite. I wear straight black on my start days with some pair of shoes that I like or whatever. So I don't quite have the stones to pull off some of the stuff that he does, but I'm also not 6'4", 240, and there for a while rocking a sub-1 ERA. So as long as he pitches good, he can wear whatever he wants.
Well, I like your fit right now, rocking the Just Baseball sweatshirt.
Yeah, the new merch. I'm merched up.
That's fire. I have one more question about the Giants, because I think the Rays do a very similar thing in the American League where they're very platoon heavy. They play matchups, and against lefties, it's almost predominantly a right-handed lineup. And then, against, or you know what I'm saying, against lefties, righties, they play the splits.
I mean, we did it for a long time. I was, the early teams that I was a part of were like that as well.
Do you guys ever, I'm just curious, do you guys ever feel that you're going a little bit out of your element when you play the Giants? Like, do you feel like sometimes teams play to the Giants' strengths kind of on accident, playing those platoon splits?
I mean, I think that's the whole thing, right? It is trying to put guys in situations that, they have been successful in and have a lot of confidence doing. And so, with this 3-batter minimum and things like that, like, it's really hard to negate some of that stuff. And, I think a lot of these things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as pure offensive rules, right? The 3-batter minimum, you're cutting down the time because you're not having 3 relievers, so you're throwing won. But it also really is an offensive, advantage, because you can, I think we had a guy, Adam Kolarek, who's been up with us this year, who was like the only guy in the world for a while that could get Juan Soto out all the time. And now his job is completely different than it used to be. I think Adam could do it against 3 righties if he needed to, right? But the ability to know that guy's going to be in there for 3 hitters is a real big, it's a real advantage for a manager or an offense, and something that I think every team has been on both sides of, and it's just part of the game now. Obviously, in 2020 we had Jock and Kike and some other guys that we were doing the back and forth thing with, and David Freese before that, and I think thinking back on those teams, like it's a big deal, because that guy's walking up there doing what he does best, right? It's not, your closer that has to throw 5 innings. You never have that, like, he's not prepared for this feel or this thing or this feeling or whatever. And so it's a big thing for a team. I remember Jock Peterson leading off games against right-handers in the playoffs. The assumption was that he was going to hit a homer. Like, it's just how it was. And, because we had seen him hammer righties for forever. And I think team-wise it's a big confidence thing.
I guess the only reason I ask is just relating to basketball too, like those Warriors teams where they would shoot a bunch of threes. You felt that sometimes teams, when they go to play Golden State, they would try and outshoot the best 3-point shooting team. So I almost feel like when the Giants and the Rays are rolling, teams are attempting to out-platoon them and almost falling into the trap that they're trying to lay for you. So I'm just curious, kind of the mindset going into that series, where we're going to play our game and we can't try and out-platoon them.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, that's probably above my pay grade a little bit, and decisions that I don't really necessarily make, right? But I think you can see how they kind of defend against that organizationally, right? Most of their relievers in Tampa and San Francisco are non-traditional. Yeah, a lot of sidearm, a lot of low slot. So
the weird Fairbanks thing over the top, short. Yeah,
I think it's like a subconscious. They're defending against their own strength, right? Like, what would give us problems? And we have a righty coming in, but it's from over here. It's not traditional 90-94 sinker slider reliever, right? So definitely something both those organizations do a really good job of, and something that you can tell is kind of ingrained in who they want to be.
Walker Buehler, I want to talk Omaha with you, because I think a lot of people have tuned in to the first couple of games of the College World Series. That was an awesome day one with a couple of late heroics, and you had Oral Roberts winning and Florida winning. And then, a lot of people tuned in to the nightcap on day 2 to watch Skeens and Cruz play, who are probably going to go 1-2 here. And Skeens was awesome through 120 pitches again. You went to Omaha twice, your sophomore year, your junior year. We've talked about that Vandy team that you were on your freshman year. You feel like that might have been the best one, but I went to Omaha just as a fan in 2016, I want to say, the year of Brendan McKay, when he was at U of L. I mean, what do you remember from just like being a guy, being a competitor that was in Omaha for 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's obviously it's the biggest stage you're ever going to play on as a college player, right? And so I think that's first and foremost, that it is what it is. It's also I think most college coaches are probably pretty similar in terms of the intensity. Maybe I bet Corbs is a little more intense than most guys, or 95% of guys. But the thing about going to Omaha is it's actually more of a kind of a celebration in terms of we have achieved something already, and you play every other day until the championship series. So you get to kind of enjoy when you win or take a day off when you lose and things like that. And I wouldn't say it's more of a pro ball setup just because you're not playing every day, but it is a little more of, hey, we're getting on the buses. We're all at the hotel. We're all together, kind of that minor league, get on the bus at this time and go win and block everything else out. And I had 4 outings there. I think I was really good in 2 of them and really bad in 2 of them. And, I've always kind of believed that the big pressure games like that, if you can be really good half the time, that's what I always have strived for. I don't think you're ever going to be great every time in the playoffs or in Omaha or whatever. But I think these playoff games, you have to go win, right? Nobody's going to, make enough mistakes to give you games, or at least less so than they would maybe in the regular season if you're playing a team that's kind of at a different level or whatever. So try and go out and be great. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But there's a lot of pressure on the other side too. And so it's a different atmosphere. And I remember we played the opening game in 2015 in front of 26,000, I think. And we're all, oh my God. But, you look at the SEC and certain places we play and the success that the SEC's had, like there is an acclimation to that. It's not that different from going and playing at LSU, which I never got to do, but Arkansas was similar that way. South Carolina can really get rocking. UT, when we played there, was like that. There's just this thing that if you've never seen that before, it can get a little overwhelmed. Mississippi State, obviously, I don't know how I forgot them, but that part of it, I think, is exciting to watch these schools like an Oral Roberts that is probably, no offense to them or their fan base, but they probably haven't played in front of more than 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people at a time, and then you walk in there on day one and you got 26,000 people there. It's an interesting deal.
And we're speaking right at the end. I'm watching, Florida walk the field after they just beat Oral Roberts 5-4. So they were hanging with them until the very end. So Jack and I, we had some takes about this College World Series. And when I say I shrug my shoulders and say some takes, because some things could come off as controversial. Okay. But one thing that I don't think is very controversial is the fact that I said, I think there is as much talent in Omaha right now as there has been in the past decade in the college.
That's what I was about to say when you were doing this build up here. It certainly feels like it.
When we talk about LSU, when we talk about Florida, like I'm seeing in Wake Forest, who is probably the best of the bunch, we're seeing of the top 10 picks, 7 or 8 of them we're watching in Omaha right now. Like, can you think back to a time where you've seen more talent in the College World Series than you do now?
No, I think one interesting caveat to that is that when I was there in 15, we had already had the draft. So we walked in Omaha already drafted. And so you could quantifiably say, hey, XYZ, this guy was the first pick, Dansby or the 8th pick. We had Fulmer. I think LSU, everyone kind of all year has said is maybe the most talented college baseball team in ages, especially the draft wise or singularly on one team. But, our team, we had 3 first-round picks on my team and 3 third-rounders. And, we walked in there and we thought we were probably one of the more talented teams there. And but we lost to Virginia that year. The year before that, we beat Virginia. They had 3 of the top 60 picks. So I don't think this is abnormal. I do think that surprisingly this year, I feel like college baseball, I know more of the players. I don't know if there's a marketing thing going on or my algorithm or what it is, but I feel like I'm seeing a little bit more of these college players. And maybe it's just the kind of generational talent that we think is out there in Omaha this year in terms of Skeens and Cruz and the kid from Florida, the 2 kids from Florida, I guess. And it's definitely a fun time for college baseball and should be a pretty cool World Series.
The thing that I loved watching the College World Series growing up was it was always post-draft pretty much until 2020, right? I think that was the first year that it wasn't post-draft, but that was almost your primer into who the next wave of prospects were going to be because you saw, hey, this kid was a 3rd-round pick by the Mets and he's playing for Coastal now. He's the shortstop. So you can almost directly quantify, hey, that kid's good. I'm going to watch him. But I'm with you. Like, I feel like I don't need to do much fishing to find out who the possible big leaguers are on the field right now. And that might just be a marketing thing with college ball, but you were on those teams.
I also kind of, I don't know if I like it or not, but there is some pros and cons to it, right? Like if the Dodgers just drafted me to go and throw 126 like Paul Skeens just did is a different animal, right? Than if I haven't been drafted yet. So I almost like that we used to have the draft because then it was like, okay, cool. You all have 2 weeks, go win for your team, go win for your school, whatever, as opposed to this. I could go, coach, I think I could throw one more, but my agent doesn't want me to because we got the draft next week. And there's an element of you want to see these guys in I'll tell you, being in a college clubhouse or whatever you want to call it, it's probably the closest group of guys you're going to play with at that moment, right? And so the ability for him to say, no, I want the ball or go throw another inning or wear a pitch intentionally and late in the game. Like all of that kind of stuff is really cool, especially when you know everything's done, right? Like I've been drafted, I haven't signed yet, but I could get shelled and I'm still drafted already. And so I think that's something that there's pros and cons on both sides of it. And I don't even know which one I would prefer. I just know that it's different than when I was there.
Jack, I really want you to ask him about your Paul Skeens take.
No, I mean, so here's my thing. Like you watch Skeens, you're enamored with Skeens. And my thought was, I feel like this guy could get outs in the bigs now with that. I know it's a little crazy, but like, I mean, you watch the pitch mix. You see he's sitting 100.7 with that sinker, and then he's throwing 120 pitches, and he's snapping off this crazy slider and this changeup. And the way that I put it was, like there are so many similarities between what he does and what Hunter Green does. And there's so much more maturation that happens in pro ball, and he's seeing college kids, Hunter Green seeing big league kids. But where do you feel like the big difference is right now if Skeens is dropped into Hunter Green's shoes?
Well, first off, I think as sad as this is to answer that question, like I think on the surface it's pretty easy to, it's 100, or it's a slider, like I haven't seen any of the data, right? So I don't want to kind of speak out of turn. If that 100 is 15-4, like it's probably not going to be that good in the major leagues. If it's 21-7, whatever, if it's an outlier number, then it probably could work. I don't think command wise people really understand how much bigger the college zone is. I just haven't watched enough of him. I know he throws strikes, and because he's getting deep into games and punching guys out and doing all the right things, he doesn't seem to walk a ton of guys. I don't know. I think the other underappreciated thing is that the ball is significantly different, right? So whatever ball he's throwing is a legitimately different animal than what he would throw in the major leagues. And that takes adjustment. You see, the guys come over from Asia and they have a different ball, and it takes them sometimes a little while to kind of do exactly what they used to do before they got to the States. And I think it's a fun thing to kind of think about. I definitely, it would not surprise me if whatever team drafted him, say they were in playoff contention, had him in the bullpen or something like that. But obviously most teams that have the number one pick aren't going to make the playoffs. So, we'll see your number two pick or whatever it's going to be. So, I think I think Carson Fulmer was the last example of that, at least for me. And really personally, like I thought he could have gone straight to the major leagues and been okay. I guess who's the last guy that was kind of straight? Mike Leake, is he probably the last guy?
Well, Leake was, weird COVID situation, but Crochet was that guy too in 2020.
Well, the craziest one is Casey Weathers debuted, or not Casey, what's his name?
Ryan.
Casey Weathers was the Vaney guy. No, Ryan Weathers debuted against us in the playoffs, but he was a high school pick. So he had only been in pro ball for like a year or something.
He was in low A. He was in Fort Wayne before that. I think his last stop was low A, and then he just bumped up.
Crazy.
So
I'm just curious too, because Skeens is getting a lot of the attention, Dylan Cruz, and deservedly so. But there's again so much talent that we talk about. Like my favorite players to watch right now in this College World Series has been this Florida pitching staff from Hurston Waldrop, Brandon Sproat. Who has been your favorite player to watch in Omaha so far?
I haven't watched a ton of it, to be honest with you. It's hard for me to. College baseball's gotten harder and harder for me to watch, just completely, objectively. Like we celebrated, we did all this stuff, but with some of their stuff they're doing now, I feel like is a little bit different than what we did. It may not have been. I don't know. We were idiots too, but I'm just used to it being a certain way and screaming when it's game tying or scary situations, not in the first and things like that. And I didn't really like guys that did that when I was in college anyway. So I think the biggest thing is if you see me scream, that means at one point in that inning I was a little scared. So
I think right now they're all terrified though. I think that's like the point. Everyone in Omaha seems like terrified, but in the best way possible. That's when all the emotions are coming out. And for me, that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah. No, I'll watch a final some, or probably if there's two of the big boy starting pitchers. I'll watch a little bit of it or watch it when it's on TV. But for the most part, we kind of watch the Dodgers around here, and that's it. Especially if Vandy was out there, it'd be a different story.
I totally understand that. I know you watched a lot of ball in your formative years, man, and we're talking to you on Father's Day evening. Yesterday was Father's Day, though you probably watched a lot of ball with Pops. So before we jump into change-ups here, just curious what your first memories of baseball with your dad was, and maybe some of the guys that really got you to fall in love with this game, because I think everybody listening has those one or two guys that made them fall in love with baseball.
Yeah. I grew up a big Reds fan. My dad was from Cincy, and he went to a school called Anderson High School. They used to play a school called Moeller that had a guy named Ken Griffey Jr. on that team at the time. So
solid.
I grew up a big Reds fan, and my dad lived in Cincy most of my life until I went to college, and his office actually is right across the little highway downtown Cincy. So we could literally see the whole field from my dad's office. And so we'd go and watch games up there or go to the game and whatnot. So I think through that, Aaron, when I was growing up, it was Aaron Harang.
Yeah.
Cueto early, Volquez early, Matt Latos I really liked watching.
How about that fight he got into the Atlantic League? Do you remember him rocking the shit out of somebody?
I got to meet him. He's an interesting cat.
I love that.
But then the fifth on that team was Bronson Arroyo, who I don't know if you guys remember at the end of his career, he was with Atlanta, I think, and then got traded to us. So when I had Tommy John surgery the first time, it literally was me and Bronson for 5 months. Me and him were the only two guys there rehabbing.
Wow.
So I got to know Bronson really well, and it was just cool because he was a Red my whole life growing up, and then was with us when I was rehabbing. And we might want to put a link on this. When we won the World Series the next year, they asked us this question: who was your favorite player growing up? And so I just knew, I kind of asked them why and knew what was going to happen. So they came on and congratulated us for winning the World Series. So I had Bronson do mine, and he like sang a song on the scoreboard or jumbotron or whatever. And I started that game, so I didn't really get to see it. I didn't know what it was until after the game, but it was pretty funny. And he and I have stayed in touch. He's one of my favorite people.
I was going to say, did you guys have jam sessions? Because he is super musically inclined. He's a really good guitarist.
Yeah. So I remember we played in Cincinnati at the end of 2021, and it was a really weird weekend, especially to happen in Cincinnati. It was Oktoberfest, which is a huge deal there.
Yeah.
Then I'm decent buddies with a guy named Brett Eldridge, who had a concert there. And then Theo Vaughn had a comedy show the next night, and Theo's a really good buddy of mine. So after the games, I was going and doing those things, and I told Bronson to come to the Theo show with me. So he had a concert, left his concert, finished his concert, came over, and we hung out with Theo and his little crew and stuff. So he developed some weird relationships along the way of this. But yeah, going back to it being Father's Day and stuff, obviously my dad was a big part of it, and we lived in different places. So wasn't around kind of the daily thing, and my grandfather was a big part of that. And it's kind of cool. I talked to a guy who works with Tom House some, and my grandfather bought all the Tom House VHSs. That was kind of the basis of me learning how to throw a baseball. And so it looks like here in a couple of weeks I might get to meet him and work with him a little bit. So it's funny how all this stuff kind of comes full circle, and it's pretty cool.
It's really so cool. Funny hearing you talk about Bronson Arroyo, because of course, after the fact, like, I have a lot of respect for Bronson Arroyo because of just the career he had. But I grew up a Yankee fan, and as I think I was 8 years old watching the Boston Red Sox with Bronson Arroyo and Keith Folk and
Cornrows.
I hated all of them. I hated them to death. I wanted all of them off the planet because they ruined my Yankees. So shout out Bronson Arroyo. That was
awesome. He threw 200 innings 8 straight years.
No way. He's not a big guy either, right? Is he sub 6 foot?
You know what's funny? No. Bronson's a decent height. He's kind of built like me. He's probably 2 inches tall. I bet he's 6'3".
Okay.
But the funniest thing about Bronson is that I think his dad was a power lifter or bodybuilder.
and he looked like that.
Bronson told me he started squatting at 6.
That's got to screw you up.
Well, here's my favorite Bronson story. It kind of sums him up, right? So when he would start his workout, he would get on the leg press machine and sit with his knees like up against his chest with 700 pounds and just stretch like that for 10 minutes and then rep it. And then he would do his workout. And that was like the only heavy thing he did, but he has been doing that his whole life apparently. And we listened to what's the album called? The big famous Pearl Jam album, One or something like that.
Yeah.
We listened to that album every day in order for 3 or 4 months straight.
No way. Did you know every word?
By the end, I didn't know a single one going into it, but that was what he did, and that was his routine. And we listened to the one album every day in order for 3.5 months or 4 months.
Dude, was it 10? Was that the name of the album?
Not one. Yeah, 10.
10. Yeah, that was their first album, I think. That's really cool, man.
But he'd be walking around singing it in the corners and stuff. Like, interesting dude. One of my favorite, but interesting dude.
That's funny.